So I always thought he's playing a blinder. He's bang on. He's made a call, and not everyone will agree with it. And, I mean, poor old people of Piddington to a degree. But, there is this kind of Brexit vibe, isn't there? We got out of Europe, now they're out of Britain. I mean, what else are they going? What else are we all going to try and escape from? And I think he's right. He's made a political choice, and it's a risk.
And you're with me, Jane Mulkerrins, with you here until 4 o'clock this afternoon. I am delighted still to be joined by Mark, Lucas and Timandra Harkness, who are helping me through all the big stories of the week and some of the smaller ones, which we'll move on to shortly as well. But first, we do have to talk about Andy Burnham versus Middle England, because reporters from the Times this week visited the Oxfordshire village of Piddington, population 350, where 96% of the villagers have voted for a symbolic referendum to secede from the UK over the plans to house 1,250 asylum seekers in a disused MOD depot nearby. Among other fundraising ideas, locals have proposed a dog show, a motorbike or classic car ride out, as well as a sponsored walk around the circumference of the proposed site. When asked about it during a visit to Ilkeston in Derbyshire on Tuesday, Andy Burnham said, "We cannot have a situation where it's only the poorest communities in the country that receive all the dispersal of refugees and asylum seekers. I do believe all parts of the country need to work to play their part." I mean, this kind of feeds into what you were saying before, Mark, about listening to people. You're nodding away here. I mean, how much of a problem do you think this is for Andy Burnham, that he is, attempting to, I guess, levy the burden of, not just asylum, but everything, more fairly across the country?
I mean, it's a fairly big thing to grapple with early on in your premiership.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I mean, a lesson I've learned is that you're probably never as more popular or more powerful than you are in those first sort of weeks and months. So I would say we all talk down to earth now. Andy does it. So I always thought he's playing a blinder. He's bang on. He's made a call, and not everyone will agree with it. And, I mean, poor old people of Piddington to a degree. But, there is this kind of Brexit vibe, isn't there? We got out of Europe, now they're out of Britain. I mean, what else are they going? What else are we all going to try and escape from? And I think he's right. He's made a political choice, and it's a risk. And I think there's too much. I'm very interested with Timandra's ideas about risk and responsibility in society, right? Been reading about that. Thanks for the education. Recommend a read up, everyone. There's not enough deferment of risk. The idea that you can run a government or, even build a housing or a power station without risk is mad. And actually you have to embrace that risk and just measure it and calibrate it and make a choice. And that's what Andy Burnham has done. And I think I admire him for it, because it's not the easiest thing to do. It's quite a bold call early on. And he said, rightly, we're going to spread this around. I've got an idea about how we're going to do this, and we're going to do it. And there will be a few upset people, and I'm sorry about that, but I've made a choice. I find that very refreshing in a leader, and I admire it. And it might go wrong, but you know what? That is part of it, okay? You can't have a good outcome without some risk. And we've had loads of leaders and people in all kinds of public life tell us you can have everything without any risk, and they're all liars. So,
well, I mean, Keir Starmer came in saying bold decisions and then failed to make any, didn't he? So I guess Andy Burnham is attempting to do something differently. I mean, is that true, Timandra? If you're going to take a risk, is it best to get it in early?
Well, yeah, politically, I think it definitely is. But in a sense, I think he's making a very deliberate political move to say precisely to, as you say, the deprived and not listened to communities. You're right. It's not fair that you should bear the brunt of all the government policies, and we're going to share it out in Middle. I mean, Middle England is a very interesting phrase, isn't it? It's. But, I also have sympathy with people in the village, because you've got a tiny village of 350 people suddenly having, 1,000 odd mainly unaccompanied young men living in a camp nearby is going to change the social vibe. And this is, I think, one of the problems with the immigration situation, because we probably do need, because, I mean, frankly, we're having fewer babies. We probably do need immigrants to keep the population growing, so that when we're all old, there'll be someone to program the robots who are going to look after us, probably.
Yeah.
But what you want is people who are, want to move here with their families, or move here and start a family and integrate and become part of society. And the people who arrive by informal routes are mostly not those people. They are mostly unaccompanied young men, and that's a very different like change to the social situation, and I think that's when it becomes a problem. My dad told me this absolutely heartwarming story of protests near him outside an asylum hotel because the people were being moved out, and he said they were mostly women with children, and the children were in the local schools, and the locals were like, don't move them, they're happy, they're in the local schools. So you can see that's a very different situation. But yeah, I mean, I think from Burnham's point of view, it's very smart to say, you know what, you're right. Like, why should the areas that are already a bit run down now be filled up with houses of multiple occupation with mainly unaccompanied young men who've come in and are scraping a living somehow, possibly in the grey economy, and, you know, bearing with all that brings.
The Times has also reported that Shabana Mahmood's plan, and the Prime Minister's plan as well, is ultimately to move asylum seekers to larger sites like this military base where services can be provided on site, and that in time she hopes to move beyond the question of whether, you know, rich communities or poorer communities should shoulder the burden, and they're actually looking at whether more isolated industrial facilities could be repurposed so that fewer people, they say, wherever they are, feel an imposition on their doorstep. I sort of have a slight issue with that, because are we saying that asylum seekers should be kept out of sight and therefore out of mind, that we don't want people integrating into our community, you know, the children going to the local school? I mean, is that what we're saying, that we want people on abandoned industrial facilities?
Well, not long term, no. But I think what we're talking about is people who've arrived and are being processed, having their asylum claims processed. And the idea that, I mean, the other thing he's talking about, which is quite right, is do that much more quickly and efficiently. Give them a decision. Either they can stay and start integrating, or they can't stay and they have to go away. And you know, that really needs to happen, because all the people hanging around in limbo is one of the worst aspects of this, I think. And they can't work, they can't integrate, they can't settle. Obviously, they're not going to be a positive contribution to the community.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is right. I mean, it's kind of a weird picture, isn't it? If there's 1,000 in Piddington and there's 100,000 people coming, that's actually 1,000 camps effectively around Britain. But that's no better or worse, in my view, than 1,000 people in rubbish hotel in a, you know, on the edge of an estate in, you know, East London, and in fact may in many ways be better in the end, both for the people and for the communities. And I think if we're able to have, as Timandra suggests, and I think there just isn't enough proper debate about the issues here, and there are real issues, you know, there's loads of young blokes coming, 76 to 80 % of these young blokes, and I understand why they're coming, and I come from a family of, you know, who came from Ireland to England as immigrants, and I'm very proud of that, and I think, you know, there's nothing wrong even with economic migrants, let alone aside. I'm very pro that as a general idea, but equally the idea of 100,000 people turning up and you've got to sort them all out is actually a hell of a job for any country and any government. And I think hopefully this is a short-term thing, but I like the idea that Burnham and Mahmood are saying, you know what, we're going to redistribute this, it's going to be a fairer setup. And I think poor old Piddington, you know, feeling that they're the first, and I did see themselves describe themselves as a Hamlet, you know.
It has apparently been in existence since the Doomsday Book.
So,
yes.
You know, poor old, you know, Hamleters. But nevertheless, I think it's right. And not everyone can gain always. You know, we can't have a society where everyone wins all the time. Infinitely.
No.
So that's that.